If you looked at a photograph of the Ukrainian front line today, you might honestly think you're staring at a history book from 1916. Mud, deep, freezing trenches, endless coils of barbed wire. The landscape is a shattered lunar surface, completely pockmarked by thousands of overlapping artillery craters. To an untrained eye, it looks exactly like the Battle of Verdun or the Somme, a static, grueling war of attrition where progress is measured in inches. But if you stand in that trench and listen closely, the illusion shatters. That high-pitched, angry whine buzzing in the sky above you isn't a wooden biplane. It's a cheap, plastic commercial quadcopter, the exact same kind of drone you might buy on Amazon right now to film your cousin's summer wedding. Except this drone isn't filming a wedding. It is currently transmitting your exact GPS coordinates, in crystal clear 4K resolution, to a hidden artillery battery miles away. Welcome to the terrifying reality of the modern battlefield. It is a bizarre, violent paradox where a century-old doctrine of trench warfare suddenly collides with the digital age. We are witnessing the brutal intersection of the First World War and the hyper-connected, fast-paced technological supremacy of the 21st century. For decades, the greatest military planners and generals around the world imagined future wars as fast, sweeping maneuvers of mechanized armor and stealth jets. They spent billions of dollars designing tanks that could race across Europe in days, supported by overwhelming air superiority and precision strikes from above. They believed the era of static, muddy trench warfare was dead and buried. But as the conflict in Ukraine has violently proven, they were completely wrong. Instead of fast tank thrusts, we see massive armored columns getting bogged down, picked apart by cheap, asymmetric weapons built from off-the-shelf consumer electronics. The war in Ukraine hasn't just introduced new weapons, it has fundamentally rewritten the core rules of combat, rendering decades of traditional military doctrine obsolete. How did we get back here? How did the most advanced military technology in human history force soldiers back into the mud like their great-grandfathers? To understand this bizarre tactical regression, we first need to look at why trenches returned, and how the sky became the most dangerous place on Earth. In every major military conflict of the 20th century, armies relied heavily on a very simple, yet absolutely crucial tactic: hiding. If you were a general, you could confidently park an entire mechanized armored division inside a dense forest, completely invisible from the air. Or you could quietly move tens of thousands of infantry troops to the front line under the pitch-black cover of a moonless night. The element of surprise was everything in warfare. You survived by striking hard exactly where your enemy wasn't looking. But in Ukraine, that crucial element of surprise is completely dead. Hiding is no longer an option on the modern battlefield. Imagine a giant, invisible digital dome covering the entire front line, an omniscient bubble where nothing can move without being instantly noticed. This dome is created because thousands of cheap, off-the-shelf drones are constantly buzzing in the sky, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They form a panoptic web of absolute surveillance. Every single tree line, every dirt road, and every abandoned building is constantly being watched from above. The very moment a heavy tank rolls out of its camouflaged hiding spot, a drone operator sitting miles away instantly sees it on their screen. The moment an infantry squad tries to sneak across an open field at night, their bright body heat is immediately tracked on a digital thermal tablet. When you are constantly being watched by a highly technological sky that never blinks, moving out in the open is basically a death sentence. Even thick steel armor provides zero protection when an artillery shell, guided by a cheap drone, is dropped precisely right on top of your roof. So, what do you do when you can't run? You can't hide in a forest, and the very sky above you is actively trying to kill you. You have only one rational, desperate choice left to survive. You grab that shovel, and you dig deep, deep into the earth. Trenches aren't a sign of backward, primitive tactics. They are the ultimate, necessary shield against the modern digital eye. Welcome to the new era of warfare. To truly grasp how a cheap plastic toy brought the mighty armored tank to its knees, we need to rewind a bit. Let's look up at the sky. For the entire history of modern warfare, owning the airspace was an exclusive VIP club. It was a luxury strictly reserved for the world's wealthiest superpowers. If you wanted real-time, high-definition intelligence from above, you needed to launch a multi-billion-dollar spy satellite or fly a massive, highly classified military drone. But the war in Ukraine took that exclusive VIP club completely smashed the doors wide open, and radically democratized the entire sky. Today, you don't need a top-secret clearance or a congressional defense budget to get a real-time aerial feed. The barrier to entry plummeted overnight. With a basic internet connection and about $500, an ordinary foot soldier can suddenly achieve what used to require an entire intelligence agency. Both sides of the conflict have aggressively weaponized commercial electronics. We are talking about the exact same quadcopters real estate agents use to photograph suburban houses. Because they are so cheap, suddenly, every single infantry platoon shivering on the muddy front line has its very own highly capable personal air force. A young soldier holding a tablet can now peek over a distant hill, scout an intricate trench line, or comfortably spot enemy armor miles away. And they can do all of this in glorious 4K resolution, entirely undetected, without ever needing to stick their fragile head out of cover to look. This isn't just a minor, convenient upgrade in field equipment. It is a fundamental, seismic shift in the very economics of how war is fought. We are watching cheap consumer electronics, bits of plastic, lithium-ion batteries, and commercial camera lenses completely outperform billions of dollars of classified military development. It is a chaotic, open-source technological revolution, and it has led directly to one of the most terrifying developments on the modern battlefield, the shrinking of time. In military terminology, there is a fundamental concept known as the kill chain. It is the deadly, calculated process of identifying a target, communicating it, and destroying it. And thanks to these cheap buzzing toys in the sky, that complex chain has been compressed so tightly that the timeline of survival has evaporated into mere seconds. To understand just how incredibly fast this new timeline is, we have to look back at the gold standard of modern warfare, Operation Desert Storm in 1991. Back then, the kill chain was a painfully slow and highly bureaucratic process. It usually took a few hours from the start to the finish line. First, a highly trained fighter pilot flying at supersonic speed spots an enemy tank. They have to manually radio those coordinates back to a command center. Then, a room full of human analysts has to verify the target, double-check the maps, clear the busy airspace, and officially authorize the strike. By the time the actual bomb is finally dropped hours later, the enemy tank has often simply driven away to get a cup of coffee. In the muddy trenches of Ukraine, that entire slow bureaucratic chain of command has been completely bypassed, flattened, and entirely deleted by modern software. Thanks to direct digital networking, the average timeline to destroy an enemy has shrunk from several hours to a terrifying 3 minutes. Sometimes even less. A young drone operator sitting in a hidden basement spots a moving target. With just 2 quick taps on a secure digital tablet, they drop a pin. That exact GPS coordinate instantly pops up on the digital screen of a friendly artillery battery parked several miles away in the forest. There is absolutely no waiting for a distant general's approval. The artillery crew simply loads the shell, adjusts their digital aim, and fires immediately. It is a deadly, highly precise game of high-explosive whack-a-mole, played relentlessly at the terrifying speed of a modern broadband internet connection. The enemy tank crew doesn't even have the time to turn the key and start their massive engine before the guided shell drops directly on them. 3 minutes. That is literally all the time you have left to live once a plastic toy spots you on this modern transparent battlefield. But simply observing the enemy from afar and calling in artillery strikes was just the first phase of this terrifying technological nightmare. Because some clever soldiers sitting in the mud inevitably asked a dark question: what if we just strap the anti-tank explosive directly to the drone itself? And with that simple, terrifyingly practical idea, the FPV, or first-person view, kamikaze drone was born, changing the battlefield forever. Now, these are not your standard slow-moving camera drones that hover gently in the air taking beautiful panoramic photos. These are highly customized, incredibly agile racing beasts, stripped of all unnecessary weight. They are designed for pure, unadulterated speed and maneuverability. An FPV drone can easily fly at over 100 miles per hour, zigzagging through trees and diving into trenches like a hungry falcon. But surprisingly, the most dangerous part of this new weapon isn't the explosive payload. It's the human brain controlling it from afar. Unlike traditional military drones flown from air-conditioned trailers with joysticks and monitors, FPV operators wear immersive virtual reality goggles. The camera feed is streamed directly into their eyes with zero latency. They aren't just flying the drone, they are literally riding the missile. There is absolutely no fancy, billion-dollar automated targeting software here, no laser guidance systems, and no heat-seeking smart computer chips. It relies entirely on the raw, lightning-fast reflexes and spatial awareness of a pilot sitting in a cold basement miles away. Ironically, the skills required to pilot these deadly weapons are the exact same skills developed by teenagers playing fast-paced video games. An entire generation raised on competitive gaming suddenly found themselves perfectly trained for the absolute most lethal form of modern digital combat. When an FPV drone is launched, it doesn't just blindly drop a bomb and fly home. It actively hunts its prey, relentlessly chasing it down. But an FPV pilot doesn't attack the heavily armored front. They can fly around, hover patiently, and look for the absolute weakest point of the armor. They can smoothly dive straight into a hot engine compartment, or fly perfectly through an open hatch with terrifying, surgical precision. A multi-million-dollar piece of advanced military engineering, completely obliterated from the inside out by a tiny piece of plastic that cost roughly $400. This brings us to the most brutal, unforgiving aspect of this new era of combat. We need to talk about the terrifying economics of asymmetric warfare. Let's do some basic math. A modern main battle tank, like a Russian T-90M or an American Abrams, costs somewhere around $4 to $5 million. But the sticker price is just the beginning. That tank requires massive, highly vulnerable fuel supply chains, specialized mechanics, and months of expensive crew training. It is a massive, heavy, logistical nightmare that requires constant protection and maintenance just to slowly roll its way onto the muddy battlefield. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have the FPV kamikaze drone. It costs roughly the exact same as a mid-range smartphone. It doesn't require a bloated defense contractor. It is aggressively assembled using cheap 3D printed plastic frames and mass-produced commercial motors ordered directly from China. The deadly explosive payload is often literally taped onto the drone using plastic zip ties and duct tape. It is the ultimate, crude democratization of lethal force. When you put these two entirely different weapons on a financial scale, the traditional military doctrine completely shatters. For the exact price of just one single tank, you could theoretically purchase and equip an army with over 10,000 individual kamikaze drones. The sheer volume difference is absolutely staggering. In a traditional battle, losing a $5 million tank is a catastrophic strategic blow. But losing a $400 drone, that's just another Tuesday. Because they are so incredibly cheap to produce, drone operators can afford to fail repeatedly. You can easily launch 50 drones at a single heavily armored target. If 49 of those drones miss, crash into trees, or get entirely fried by invisible electronic warfare jammers, but just one single drone manages to slip through, the return on investment is still phenomenally high. The asymmetric math fundamentally guarantees that the cheap, persistent swarm will always eventually overwhelm the expensive giant. We are actively witnessing the terrifying death of traditional armored supremacy. But here is the catch. None of this lethal swarm logic works without a highly robust digital backbone. In the opening days of any major modern conflict, the very first and most critical casualty is almost always the communication network. Invading armies will aggressively target traditional cell phone towers, radio relays, and civilian internet hubs, desperately trying to blind and deafen their opponent. And without a stable, high-speed connection, a sophisticated kamikaze drone is effectively reduced to being just an expensive, useless plastic paperweight. To solve this, Ukraine turned to the stars. Enter the decentralized satellite constellation, a vast network of thousands of low Earth orbit satellites like Starlink. Instead of relying on fragile, easily destroyed local cell towers, a small, flat dish sitting outside a muddy bunker beams a signal directly into space. This creates a highly resilient, constantly moving digital nervous system that is incredibly difficult for the enemy to completely shut down or destroy. This constant, uninterrupted connectivity hasn't just kept the drone swarms flying, it has fundamentally flattened the entire traditional military command hierarchy. In older wars, command was strictly top-down. A general makes a decision in a distant, safe bunker, and the order slowly trickles down the chain. Today, the front line operates as a decentralized, interconnected web of instant information sharing, empowering the lowest-ranking soldiers with unprecedented battlefield awareness. A 22-year-old squad leader shivering in a trench can now stream a live high-definition drone feed directly to a nearby friendly artillery crew. It operates remarkably like a popular ride-sharing app on your smartphone. But instead of ordering a taxi, you are ordering a high-explosive artillery strike. We literally have an Uber for artillery, a digitized, crowdsourced tactical map where any unit can spot a target, and the nearest gun takes the shot. This level of horizontal, peer-to-peer communication makes the army incredibly lethal, highly adaptable, and extremely difficult to completely wipe out. But of course, in the relentless, unforgiving arms race of modern war, every single new technological advantage is immediately met with a fierce countermeasure. The enemy adapted. The sky is now filled with invisible electronic warfare, massive jamming signals desperately trying to sever that crucial digital connection. When that vital connection is severed by a powerful jammer, a manually controlled drone goes completely blind and deaf. It simply falls out of the sky. Useless. But military engineers are already rapidly deploying the next terrifying countermeasure to solve this exact problem: fully autonomous artificial intelligence. Instead of relying on a constant live video feed beamed back to a human operator, the new generation of kamikaze drones uses onboard machine vision. The drone's internal computer is trained on millions of images. Once the human pilot points it at a target and presses lock, the drone takes over completely. If an electronic warfare jammer cuts the signal at the last minute, it simply doesn't matter anymore. The drone no longer needs you. It will finish the kill entirely on its own. We are rapidly crossing a terrifying ethical threshold. For the first time, we are handing over the final, lethal decision of who lives and dies to an automated algorithm. The war in Ukraine has irreversibly mutated the very DNA of combat. The grand, sweeping tank battles of the 20th century are likely gone forever. Yet, the ultimate, cruel irony of this hyper-advanced digital revolution is exactly where it has forced the actual human soldiers to live out their days. Underneath this terrifying robotic sky, men are still huddled in the freezing mud, gripping shovels just exactly like their great-grandfathers did at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. The trench remains the absolute only reliable sanctuary against an omniscient digital eye that never blinks, never sleeps, and is actively learning to hunt on its own. It is a brutal war of absolute extremes. Soldiers fighting a grueling, primitive war of survival in the dirt, while simultaneously orchestrating a hyper-connected, decentralized war in the clouds. The battlefields of tomorrow will not be conquered by billion-dollar tanks driving proudly across open plains. They will be dominated by those who master the cheap, the small, and the many. So the next time you look up at a beautiful, clear blue sky, just remember how quickly it can change from a symbol of freedom into a panoptic ceiling of surveillance. Because the blueprint for the absolute future of warfare has already been permanently written in the thick mud of Eastern Europe. And there is no going back. If you found this deep dive into the terrifying reality of modern combat fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more history and geopolitical analysis. See you next time.